Chapter 4. As usual, the birds filled the grey and foggy dawn with an explosion of chirping in anticipation of the sunrise. As usual, the first members of the party ready to set off were the taciturn women from Kernow and their children. Emil Rages turned out to be equally swift and energetic, joining the others with a travelling staff and a leather bag over one shoulder. The rest of the company, who had drained the still during the night, were not quite so lively. The cool of the morning roused and revived the revellers, but failed to thwart the effects of the mandrake moonshine. Geralt awoke in a corner of the shack with his head in Milva's lap. Zoltan and Dandelion lay in each other's arms on a pile of mandrake roots, snoring so powerfully that they were making the bundles of herbs hanging on the walls flutter. Percival was discovered outside, curled up in a ball under a hagberry bush, covered by the straw mat Rages normally used to wipe his boots on. The five of them betrayed distinct, but varied symptoms of fatigue, and they all went to soothe their raging thirst at the spring. However, by the time the mists had dissipated and the red ball of the sun was blazing in the tops of the pines and larches of Fen Khan, the company were already on their way, marching briskly among the barrows. Rages took the lead, followed by Percival and Dandelion, who kept each other's spirits up by singing a two-part ballad about three sisters and an iron wolf. After them trudged Zoltan Chive, leading the chestnut colt by the reins. The dwarf had found a knobbly ashen staff in the barber surgeon's yard, which he was now using to whack all the many as they passed, and wish the long-deceased elves eternal rest, while Field Marshal Windbag, who was sitting on his shoulder, puffed up his feathers and occasionally squawked, reluctantly, indistinctly, and somewhat half-heartedly. Milva turned out to be the least tolerant to the mandrake distillate. She marched with visible difficulty, was sweaty, pale, and acted like a bear with a sore head, not even responding to the twittering of the little girl with the plaits who was riding in the black saddle. Geralt thus made no attempt to strike up a conversation, not being in the best of shape himself. The fog and the adventures of the Iron Wolf, sung in loud, though somewhat morning-after voices, meant that they happened upon a small group of peasants suddenly and without warning. The peasants, however, had heard them much earlier, and were waiting, standing motionless among the monoliths sunk into the ground, their grey homespun coats camouflaging them perfectly. Zoltan Chive barely avoided whacking one of them with his staff, having mistaken him for a tombstone. "Yo-ho-ho!" he shouted. "Forgive me, good people. I didn't notice you. Good day to you. Greetings." The dozen peasants murmured an answer to his greeting in an incoherent chorus, grimly scrutinizing the company. The peasants were clutching shovels, picks, and 6-foot-pointed stakes. "Greetings," the dwarf repeated. "I presume you're from the camp by the Chotler, am I right?" Rather than answering, one of the peasants pointed out Milva's horse to the rest of them. "That black one," he said. "See it?" "The black," affirmed another, and licked his lips. "Oh, yes, the black should do the job." "Eh?" Zoltan said, noticing their expressions and gestures. "Are you referring to our black steed? What about it? It's a horse, not a giraffe. There's nothing to be astonished about. What are you up to, my good fellows, in this burial ground?" "And you?" the peasant asked, looking askance at the company. "What are you doing here?" "We've bought this land," the dwarf said, looking him straight in the eye and hitting a menhir with his staff, "and we're piecing it out to check we haven't been swindled on the acreage. And we are hunting a vampire." "What? A vampire?" the oldest peasant repeated emphatically, scratching his forehead beneath a felt cap, stiff with grime. "He must have his lair somewhere here, curse him. We've sharpened these here aspen stakes, and now we shall find the scoundrel and run him through so he will never rise again." "And we've holy water in the pot the priest gave us," another peasant called cheerfully, pointing to the vessel. "We'll sprinkle it on the bloodsucker, make things hot for him." "Ha ha!" Zoltan Chive said with a smile. "I see it's a proper hunt, full-scale and well-organised. A vampire, you say? Well, you're in luck, good fellows. We have a vampire specialist in our company. He broke off and swore under his breath, because the Witcher had kicked him hard in the ankle. "Who saw the vampire?" Geralt asked, hushing his companions with a telling glance. "Why do you think you should be looking for him here?" The peasants whispered among themselves. "No one saw him," the peasant in the felt cap finally admitted, "or heard him. How can you see him when he flies at night and the dark? How can you hear him when he flies on bat's wings without a sound?" "We didn't see the vampire," added another, "but there are signs of his ghastly practices. Ever since the moon's been full, the fiend's murdered one of our number every night. He's already torn 2 people apart, ripped them to shreds. A woman and a stripling. Horrors and terrors. The vampire tore the poor wretches to ribbons and drank all their blood. What are we to do? Stand idly by for a 3rd night? But who says the culprit is a vampire, and not some other predator? Whose idea was it to root around in this burial ground? The venerable priest told us to. He's a learned and pious man, and thanks be to the gods he arrived in our camp. He said at once that a vampire was plaguing us, as punishment for we've neglected our prayers and church donations. Now he's reciting prayers and carrying out all kinds of exorcisms in the camp, and ordered us to search for the tomb where the undead fiend sleeps during the day. What, here? And where would a vampire's grave be, if not on a burial ground? And anyway, it's an elven burial ground, and every toddler knows that elves are a rotten, godless race, and every second elf is condemned to damnation after death. Elves are to blame for everything. Elves and barber surgeons, said Zoltan, nodding his head seriously. That's true, every child knows that. That camp you were talking about, is it far from here? Why, no. Don't tell him too much, father, said an unshaven peasant with a shaggy fringe, the one who had previously been unfriendly. The devil only knows who they are. They're a queer-looking band. Come on, let's get to work. Let them give us the horse and they can go on their way. Right you are, the older peasant said. Let's not dilly-dally. Time's getting on. Hand over the horse, that black one. We need it to search for the vampire. Get that kid off the saddle, lassie. Milva, who had been staring at the sky with a blank expression all along, looked at the peasant and her features hardened dangerously. Talking to me, yokel? What do you think? Give us the black, we need it. Milva wiped her sweaty neck and gritted her teeth, and the expression in her tired eyes became truly ferocious. What's this all about, good people? The witch asked, smiling and trying to diffuse the tense situation. Why do you need this horse, the one you are so politely requesting? How else are we going to find the vampire's grave? Everybody knows you have to ride around the cemetery on a black colt, as it will stop by the vampire's grave and will not be budged from it. Then you have to dig up the vampire and stab him with an aspen stake. Don't argue with us, for we're desperate. It's a matter of life and death here. We have to have that black horse. Will another colour do? Dandelion asked placatingly, holding out Pegasus's reins to the peasant. Not a chance. Pity for you, then, Milva said through clenched teeth, because I'm not giving you my horse. What do you mean you won't? Didn't you hear what we said, wench? We have to have it. You might, but I don't have to give it to you. We can solve this amicably, Regis said in a kind voice. If I understand rightly, Miss Milva is reluctant to hand over her horse to a stranger. You could say that, the archer said, and spat heartily. I cringe at the very thought. Both the wolves have eaten much, and the sheep have not been touched, the barber surgeon recited calmly. Let Miss Milva mount the horse herself and carry out the necessary circuit of the necropolis. I'm not going to ride around the graveyard like an idiot. And no one's asking you to, wench, said the one with the shaggy fringe. This requires a bold and strong blade. A maid's place is in the kitchen, bustling around the stove. A wench may come in handy later, true enough, because a virgin's tears are very useful against a vampire, for if you sprinkle a vampire with him, he burns up like a firebrand. But the tears must be shed by a pure and untouched wench, and you don't quite look the part, love. So, you're not much use for anything. Milva took a quick step forward, and her right fist shot out as fast as lightning. There was a crack, and the peasant's head lurched backwards, which meant his bristly throat and chin created an excellent target. The girl took another step and struck straight ahead with the heel of her open hand, increasing the force of the blow with the twist of her hips and shoulders. The peasant staggered backwards, tripped over his own feet, and keeled over, banging the back of his head with an audible thud against the menhir. Now you see what use I am, the archer said, in a voice trembling with fury, rubbing her fist. Who's the blade now, and whose place is in the kitchen? Truly, there's nothing like a fist fight which clears everything up. The bold and strong one is still on her feet, and the pussy and the milksop is lying on the ground. Am I right, yokels? The peasants didn't hurry to answer, but looked at Milva with their mouths wide open. The one in the felt cap knelt down by the one on the ground and slapped him gently on the cheek. In vain. Killed? He wailed, raising his head. Dead? How could you, wench? How could you just up and kill a man? Well, I didn't mean to, Milva whispered, lowering her hands and blenching frightfully. And then she did something no one expected. She turned away, staggered, rested her forehead against the menhir, and vomited violently. What's up with him? Slight concussion, the barber surgeon replied, standing up and fastening his bag. His skull's in one piece. He's already regained consciousness. He remembers what happened, and he knows his own name. That's a good sign. Miss Milver's intense reaction was, fortunately, groundless. The Witcher looked at the archer, who was sitting at the foot of the menhir, with her eyes staring into the distance. She isn't a delicate maiden prone to that sort of emotion, he muttered. I'd be more inclined to blame yesterday's hooch. She's puked before, Zoltan broke in softly. The day before yesterday, at the crack of dawn, while everyone was still asleep. I think it's because of those mushrooms we scoffed in Turlough. My guts gave me grief for 2 days. Regis looked at the Witcher from under his greying eyebrows with a strange expression on his face, smiled mysteriously, and wrapped himself in his black woolen cloak. Geralt went over to Milver and cleared his throat. How do you feel? Rough. How's the yokel? He'll be fine. He's come round, but Regis won't let him get up. The peasants are making a cradle, and we'll carry him to the camp between 2 horses. Take mine. We're using Pegasus and the Chestnut. They're more docile. Get up. It's time we hit the road. The enlarged company now resembled a funeral procession, and crawled along at a funereal pace. What do you think about this vampire of theirs? Zoltan Chive asked the Witcher. Do you believe their story? I didn't see the victims. I can't comment. It's a pack of lies, Dandelion declared with conviction. The peasants said the dead had been torn apart. Vampires don't do that. They bite into an artery and drink the blood, leaving 2 clear fang marks. The victim quite often survives. I've read about it in a respectable book. There were also illustrations showing the marks of vampire bites on virgins' swan-like necks. Can you confirm that, Geralt? What do you want me to confirm? I didn't see those illustrations. I'm not very clued up about virgins, either. Don't scoff. You can't be a stranger to vampire bite marks. Ever come across a case of a vampire ripping its victim to shreds? No, that never happens. In the case of higher vampires, never, I agree, Emil Regis said softly. From what I know, Alpors, Katakans, Mullahs, Bruxers, and Nosferats don't mutilate their victims. On the other hand, Fleders and Ekimers are pretty brutal with their victims' remains. Bravo, Geralt said, looking at him in genuine admiration. You didn't leave out a single class of vampire, nor did you mention any of the imaginary ones, which only exist in fairy tales. Impressive knowledge indeed. You must also know that Ekimers and Fleders are never encountered in this climate. What happened then? Zoltan snorted, swinging his ashen staff. Who mutilated that woman and that lad in this climate, then? Or did they mutilate themselves in a fit of desperation? The list of creatures that may have been responsible is pretty long, beginning with a pack of feral dogs, quite a common affliction during times of war. You can't imagine what dogs like that are capable of. Half the supposed victims of chaotic monsters can actually be chalked up to packs of wild farmyard curs. Does that mean you rule out monsters? Not in the least. It may have been a strigger, a harpy, a graveear, or a ghoul. Not a vampire? Unlikely. The peasants mentioned some priest or other, Percival Schuttenbach recalled. Do priests know much about vampires? Some are expert on a range of subjects, to quite an advanced level, and their opinions are worth listening to as a rule. Sadly, that doesn't apply to all of them. Particularly the kind that roam around forests with fugitives, the dwarf snorted. He's most probably some kind of hermit, an illiterate anchorite from the wilderness. He dispatched a peasant exhibition to your burial ground, Regis. Have you ever noticed a single vampire while you were gathering mandrake there? Not even a tiny one? A teeny-weeny one? No, never. The barber surgeon gave a faint smile. But no wonder. A vampire, as you've just heard, flies in the dark on bat's wings without making a sound. He's easy to miss. And easy to see one where it isn't and has never been, Geralt confirmed. When I was younger, I wasted my time and energy several times chasing after delusions and superstitions which had been seen and colourfully described by an entire village, including the headman. Once, I spent 2 months living in a castle which was supposedly haunted by a vampire. There was no vampire, but they fed me well. No doubt, however, you have experienced cases when the rumours about vampires were well-founded, Regis said, not looking at the Witcher. In those cases, I presume your time and energy were not wasted. Did the monsters die by your sword? It has been known. In any event, Zoltan said, the peasants are in luck. I think we'll wait in that camp for Munro Boyce and the lads, and the rest won't do you any harm either. Whatever killed the woman and the boy, I don't fancy his chances when the Witcher turns up in the camp. While we're at it, Geralt said, pursing his lips, I'd rather you didn't bruit who I am and what my name is. That particularly applies to you, Dandelion. As you wish, the dwarf nodded. You must have your reasons. Lucky you forewarned us, because I can see the camp. And I can hear it, Milver added, breaking a lengthy silence. They're making a fearful racket. The sound we can hear, Dandelion said, playing the wiseacre, is the everyday symphony of a refugee camp. As usual, scored for several hundred human throats, as well as no fewer bovine, ovine, and anserine ones. The solo parts are being performed by women squabbling, children bawling, a cock crowing, and, if I'm not mistaken, a donkey, who someone's poked in the backside with a thistle. The title of the symphony is A Human Community Fights for Survival. The symphony, as usual, can be heard and smelled, Regis observed, quivering the nostrils of his noble nose. This community, as it fights for survival, gives off the delicious fragrance of boiled cabbage, a vegetable without which survival would apparently be impossible. The characteristic olfactory accent is also being created by the effects of bodily functions, carried out in random places, most often on the outskirts of the camp. I've never understood why the fight for survival manifests itself in a reluctance to dig latrines. To hell with your smart-ass chatter, said Milver in annoyance. 3 dozen fancy words when 3 will do. It stinks of shit and cabbage. Shit and cabbage always go hand in hand, Percival Schuttenbach said pithily. One drives the other. It's perpetuum mobile. No sooner had they set foot in the noisy and foul-smelling camp among the campfires, wagons and shelters than they became the centre of interest for all the fugitives gathered there, of which there must have been at least 200, possibly even more. The interest bore fruit quickly and remarkably. Someone suddenly screamed, someone else suddenly bellowed, someone suddenly flung their arms around someone else's neck, someone began to laugh wildly, and someone else to sob wildly. There was a huge commotion. At first it was difficult to work out what was happening among the cacophony of men, women and children screaming, but finally all was explained. 2 of the women from Kurno, who had been travelling with them, had found, respectively, a husband and a brother, whom they had believed to be dead or to be missing without trace in the turmoil of war. The delight and tears seemed to be never-ending. Something so banal and melodramatic, Dandelion said with conviction, indicating the moving scene, could only happen in real life. If I tried to end one of my ballads like that, I would be ribbed mercilessly. Undoubtedly, Zoltan confirmed. Nonetheless, banalities like these gladden the heart, don't they? One feels more cheerful when fortune gives one something, rather than only taking. Well, we got rid of the womenfolk. We guided them, and finally got them here. Come on, no point hanging around. For a moment, the Witcher felt like suggesting they delay their departure. He was counting on one of the women deciding it would be fitting to express a few words of gratitude and thanks to the dwarf. He abandoned that idea, though, when he saw no sign of it happening. The women, overjoyed at being reunited with their loved ones, had completely forgotten about Geralt and his company. What are you waiting for? Zoltan said, looking at him keenly. To be covered in blossom out of gratitude, or anointed with honey? Let's clear off. There's nothing for us here. You're absolutely right. They didn't get far. A squeaky little voice stopped them in their tracks. The freckle-faced little girl with the plaits had caught them up. She was out of breath and had a large posy of wildflowers in her hand. Thank you, she squeaked, for looking after me and my little brother and my mummy, for being kind to us and all that. I picked these flowers for you. Thank you, Zoltan Chive said. You're kind, the little girl added, sticking the end of her plait into her mouth. I don't believe what Auntie said at all. You aren't filthy little burrowing midgets, and you aren't a grey-haired misfit from hell, and you, Uncle Dandelion, aren't a gobbling turkey. Auntie wasn't telling the truth. And you, Auntie Maria, aren't a slapper with a bow and arrow. You're Auntie Maria, and I like you. I picked the prettiest flowers for you." "Thank you," Milva said in a slightly altered voice.
"We all thank you," Zoltan echoed. "Hey, Percival, you filthy little burrowing midget. Give the child some token as a farewell present. A souvenir. Have you got a spare stone in one of your pockets?"
"I have. Take this, little miss. It's beryllium aluminium cyclosilicate, properly known as
an emerald." The dwarf finished off the sentence. "Don't confuse the child. She won't remember anyway."
"Oh, how pretty, and how green. Thank you, very, very much."
"Enjoy it, and may it bring you fortune."
"And don't lose it," Dandelion muttered, "because that little pebble's worth as much as a small farm." "Get away," Zoltan said, adorning his cap with the cornflowers the girl had given him. "It's only a stone, nothing special. Take care of yourself, little miss. Let's go and sit down by the ford to wait for Broys, Yays and Varder and the others. They ought to stroll by any time now. Strange they haven't shown up yet. I forgot to get the bloody cards off 'em. I bet they're sitting somewhere and playing barrel."
"The horses need feeding," Milva said, "and watering. Let's go towards the river."
"Perhaps we'll happen upon some home-cooked fare," Dandelion added. "Percival, take a gander around the camp and put your hooter to use. We'll eat where the food is tastiest." To their slight amazement, the way down to the river was fenced off and under guard. The peasants guarding the watering place were demanding a farthing per horse. Milva and Zoltan were incandescent, but Geralt, hoping to avoid a scene and the publicity it would lead to, calmed them down, while Dandelion contributed a few coins he dug from the depths of his pocket. Soon after, Percival Schuttenbach turned up, dour and cross. "Found any grub?" The gnome cleared his nose and wiped his fingers on the fleece of a passing sheep.
"Yes, but I don't know we can afford it. They expect to be paid for everything here, and the prices will take your breath away. Flour and barley groats are £1 a pound. A plate of thin soup's 2 nobles. A pot of weatherfish caught in the chotler costs the same as a pound of smoked salmon in Dillingham.
And fodder for the horses?
A measure of oats costs a thaler."
"How much?" the dwarf yelled. "How much?"
"How much? How much?" Milva snapped. "Ask the horses how much. They'll peg it if we make them nibble grass, and there isn't any here anyway." There was no way of debating self-evident facts. Attempts at hard bargaining with the peasant selling oats didn't achieve anything either. He relieved Dandelion of the last of his coins, and was also treated to a few insults from Zoltan, which didn't bother him in the slightest. But the horses enthusiastically stuck their muzzles into the nosebags.
"Daylight bloody robbery!" the dwarf yelled,
unloading his anger by aiming blows of his staff at the wheels of passing wagons.
"Incredible that they let us breathe here for nothing, and don't charge a halfpenny for each inhalation, or a farthing for a dump."
"Higher physiological needs," Regis declared in utter seriousness, "have a price. Do you see the tarpaulin stretched between those sticks, and the peasant standing alongside? He's peddling the charms of his own daughter. Price open to negotiation. A moment ago I saw him accepting a chicken."
"I predict a bad end for your race, humans," Zoltan Chive said grimly. "Every sentient creature on this earth, when it falls into want, poverty and misfortune, usually cleaves to his own, because it's easier to survive the bad times in a group, helping one another. But you humans, you just wait for a chance to make money from other people's mishaps. When there's hunger, you don't share out your food, you just devour the weakest ones. This practice works among wolves, since it lets the healthiest and strongest individuals survive. But among sentient races, selection of that kind usually allows the biggest bastards to survive and dominate the rest. Come to your own conclusions and make your own predictions."
Dandelion forcefully protested, giving examples of even greater scams and self-seeking among the dwarves, but Zoltan and Percival drowned him out, simultaneously and loudly imitating with their lips the long drawn-out sounds which accompany farting, by both races considered an expression of disdain for one's adversary's arguments in a dispute. The sudden appearance of a small group of peasants led by their friend the vampire hunter, the old chap in the felt cap, brought an end to the quarrel.
"It's about Cloggy," one of the peasants said. "We aren't buying anything," the dwarf and the gnome snapped in unison.
"The one whose head you split open,"
another peasant quickly explained.
"We were planning to get him married off."
"We've got nothing against that," Zoltan said angrily. "We wish him and his new bride all the best. Good health, happiness and prosperity."
"And lots of little Cloggies," Dandelion added.
"Just a moment,"
the peasant said. You may laugh, but how are we to get him hitched? For ever since you whacked him in the head, he's been totally dazed and can't tell day from night. It isn't that bad, Milver grunted, eyes fixed on the ground. He seems to be doing better. That is, much better than he was early this morning. I've no idea how clog he was early this morning, the peasant retorted, but I just saw him standing in front of an upright thill saying what a beauty she was. But never mind, I'll say it briefly. Pay up the blood money. What? When a knight kills a peasant, he must pay blood money, so says the law. I'm not a knight, Milver yelled. That's one thing, Dandelion said in her defence, and for another it was an accident, and for a third, Cloggy is alive, so blood money's out of the question. The most you can expect is compensation, namely redress. But for a fourth, we're penniless. So, hand over your horses. Hey, Milver said, her eyes narrowing malevolently. You must be out of your mind, yokel. Mind you don't go too far.
Motherfucker!
Field Marshal Windbag squawked. Ah, the birds hit the nail on the head, Zoltan Chive drawled, tapping his axe, which was stuck into his belt. You ought to know, tillers of the soil, that I also don't have the best opinion about the mothers of individuals who think of nothing but profit, even if they plan to make money out of their mate's cracked skull. Be off with you, people. If you go away forthwith, I promise I won't come after you.
If you don't want to pay, let the authorities arbitrate.
The dwarf ground his teeth and was just reaching for his battle-axe when Geralt seized him by the elbow. Calm down. How do you want to solve this problem? By killing them all? Why, kill them right away. It's enough to cripple them good and proper. That's enough, darn it, the Witcher hissed, and then turned to the peasant. These authorities you were talking about, who are they?
Our camp elder, Hector Larbs, the headman from Brazier, one of the villages that was burnt down.
Lead us to him, then. We'll come to some agreement.
He's busy at present, the peasant announced. He's sitting in judgment on a witch. There, do you see that crowd by the maple? They've caught a hag who is in league with a vampire.
Here we go again, Dandelion snorted, spreading his arms.
Did you hear that? When they aren't digging up cemeteries, they're hunting witches, supposedly vampires' accomplices. Folks, perhaps instead of ploughing, sowing and harvesting, you'll become witches. Joke as much as you like, the peasant said, and laugh all you want, but there's a priest here, and priests are more trustworthy than witches. The priest said that vampires always carry out their practices in league with witches. The witch summons the vampire and points out the victim to him, then blinds everyone's eyes so they won't see anything. And it turned out it was indeed like that, a second one added. We were harbouring a treacherous hag among us, but the priest saw through her witchcraft, and now we're going to burn her.
What else? The Witcher muttered. Very well, we'll take a look at your coat, and we'll talk to the elder about the accident that befell the unfortunate Cloggy. But we'll think about suitable compensation. Right, Percival? I'll wager we'll find another pebble in one of your pockets. Lead on, good people. The procession set off towards a spreading maple. The ground beneath it was indeed teeming with excited people. The Witcher, having purposely slowed his pace, tried to strike up a conversation with one of the peasants, who looked reasonably normal. Who's this witch they've captured? Was she really engaged in black magic? Well, sir, the peasant mumbled, I couldn't see. That wench is a stranger. To my mind, she's not quite right in the head. Grown up, but still only pleased with the nippers, as if she was a child herself. Ask her something and she won't say a word. Everyone says she's consorted with a vampire and hexed people. Everyone except the suspect, said Rages, who until then had been walking quietly beside the Witcher. Because she, if asked, wouldn't utter a word, I'm guessing. There was not enough time for a more detailed investigation, because they were already under the maple. They made their way through the crowd, not without the help of Zoltan and his ashen staff. A girl of about 16 had been tied to the rack of a wagon laden with sacks, her arms spread wide apart. The girl's toes barely reached the ground. Just as they arrived, her shift and blouse were torn away to reveal thin shoulders. The captive reacted by rolling her eyes and loosing a foolish combination of giggling and sobbing. A fire had been started directly alongside the wagon. Someone had fanned the coals well, and someone else had used pincers to place some horseshoes in the glowing embers. The excited cries of the priest rose above the crowd.
Vile witch! Godless female! Confess the truth! Ha! Just look at her, people. She's overindulged in some devilish herbs. Just look at her. Witchery is written all over her countenance.
The priest who spoke those words was thin, and his face was as dark and dry as a smoked fish. His black robes hung loosely on his skinny frame. A sacred symbol glistened on his neck. Geralt didn't recognize which deity it represented, and anyway he wasn't an expert. The pantheon, which in recent times had been growing quickly, did not interest him much. The priest must, however, have belonged to one of the newer religious sects. The older ones were concerned with more useful matters than catching girls, tying them to wagons, and inciting superstitious mobs against them.
Since the dawn of time, woman has been the root of all evil, the tool of chaos, the accomplice in a conspiracy against the world and the human race. Woman is governed only by carnal lust. That is why she so willingly serves demons, in order to slake her insatiable urges and her unnatural wantonness.
"We'll soon learn more about women," Regis muttered. "This is a phobia in a pure clinical form. The devout man must often dream about a vagina dentata." "I'll wager it's worse," Dandelion murmured. "I'm absolutely certain that even when he's awake he dreams about a regular, toothless one, and the semen has affected his brain." "But it's this feeble-minded girl who will have to pay for it." "Unless we can find someone," Milver growled, "who'll stop that black-robed ass." Dandelion looked meaningfully and hopefully at the Witcher, but Geralt avoided his gaze.
"And of what, if not female witchery, are our current calamities and misfortunes the result?" the priest continued to yell. "For no one else but the sorceresses betrayed the kings on the Isle of Thanedd and concocted the assassination of the king of Redania. Indeed, no one else but the elven witch of Dol Blatana is sending squirrels after us. Now you see to what evil the familiarity with sorceresses has led us, and the tolerance of their vile practices, turning a blind eye to their wilfulness, their impudent hubris, their wealth. And who is to blame? The kings. The vain-glorious kings renounced the gods, drove away the priests, took away their offices and seats on councils, and showered the loathsome sorceresses with honours and gold. And now we all suffer the consequences."
"Aha! There lies the rub," Dandelion said. "You were wrong, Regis. It was all about politics, and not vaginas." "And about money," Zoltan Chive added.
"Verily," the priest roared, "I say unto you, before we join battle with Niflgaard, let us first purge our own house of these abominations. Scorch this abscess with a white-hot iron, subject it to a baptism of fire. We shall not allow any woman who dabbles in witchcraft to live."
"We shall not allow it! Burn her at the stake!" yelled the crowd. The girl, who was bound to the wagon, laughed hysterically and rolled her eyes.
All right, easy does it,"
said a lugubrious peasant of immense size, who until that moment had been silent, and around whom was gathered a small group of similarly silent men and several grim-faced women.
"We've only had squawking so far. Everyone's capable of squawking, even crows. We expect more from you, venerable father, than we would from a crow. Do you refute my words, elder Labs? The words of a priest?"
"I'm not refuting anything," the giant replied. Then he spat on the ground and hitched up a pair of coarse breeches.
"That wench is an orphan and a stray, no family of mine. If it turns out that she is in league with a vampire, take her and kill her. But while I'm the elder of this camp, only the guilty will be punished here. If you want to punish her, first establish her guilt." "That I shall!"
the priest screamed, giving a sign to his stooges, the same ones who had previously put the horseshoes into the fire.
"I'll show you incontrovertibly. You, Labs, and everyone else present here."
His stooges brought out a small, blackened cauldron, with a curved handle from behind the wagon, and set it on the ground.
"Here is the proof,"
the priest roared, kicking the cauldron over. A thin liquid spilt onto the ground, depositing some small pieces of carrots, some strips of unrecognizable greens, and several small bones onto the sand.
"The witch was brewing a magic concoction.
an elixir which enabled her to fly through the air to her vampire lover, to have immoral relations with him and hatch more iniquities. I know the ways and deeds of sorcerers, and I know what that decoct is made of. The witch boiled up a cat alive."
The crowd oohed and ahed in horror. "Ghastly," Dandelion said, shuddering. "Boiling a creature alive." I felt sorry for the girl, but she went a bit too far.
"Shut your gob,"
Milver hissed.
"Here is the proof," the priest yelled,
holding up a small bone he had removed from the steaming puddle.
"Here is the irrefutable proof, a cat's bone." "That's a bird's bone," Zoltan Chive said coldly, squinting. "It's a jay's, I would say, or a pigeon's. The girl cooked herself some broth, and that's that." "Silence, you pagan imp," the priest roared. "Don't blaspheme, or the gods will punish you at the hands of the pious. The brew came from a cat, I tell you."
"From a cat? Without doubt a cat,"
the peasants surrounding the priest yelled.
"The wench had a cat, a black cat. Everyone knew she did. It followed her around everywhere. And where is that cat now?"
"It's gone
into the pot. Cooked, boiled up as a potion."
"Right you are. The witch has cooked up the cat into a potion. No other proof is needed. Into the fire with the witch. But first, torture her. Let her confess everything."
"Kin hell,"
Field Marshal Windbag squawked.
"It's a shame about that cat,"
Percival Shootenback suddenly said in a loud voice.
"It was a fine beast, sleek and fat. Fur shining like anthracite, eyes like 2 Chryso barrels, long whiskers, and a tail as thick as a mechanical's tool. Everything you could want in a cat. He must have caught plenty of mice."
The peasants fell silent.
"And how would you know, Master Gnome?" someone asked. "How do you know what the cat looked like?"
Percival Shootenbach cleared his nose and wiped his fingers on a trouser leg.
"Because he's sitting over there on a cart, right behind you."
The peasants all turned around at once, muttering as they observed the cat sitting on a pile of bundles. The cat, meanwhile, utterly unconcerned about being the centre of attention, stuck a hind leg up in the air and got down to licking his rump.
"Thus it has turned out," Zoltan Chive said, breaking the silence, "that your irrefutable proof is a load of crap, Reverend. What will the next proof be? Perhaps a she-cat? That would be good. Then we'll put them together, they'll produce a litter, and not a single rodent will come within half an arrow's shot of the granary."
Several peasants snorted, and several others, including Elder Larbs, cackled openly. The priest turned purple with rage.
"I will remember you, blasphemer!" he roared, pointing a finger at the dwarf. "Oh, heathen kobold! Oh, creature of darkness! How did you come to be here? Perhaps you are in collusion with the vampire. Just wait, we'll punish the witch, and then we'll interrogate you. But first we'll try the witch. Horseshoes have already been put on the coals, so we'll see what the sinner reveals when her hideous skin starts to sizzle. I tell you, she will confess to the crimes of witchcraft herself, and what more proof is there than a confession?" "Oh, she will, Hector Lab said. "And were red-hot horseshoes placed against the soles of your feet, Reverend, you would surely even confess to immoral coition with a mare. Ah, you're a godly man, but you sound like a rascal." "Yes, I'm a godly man," the priest bellowed, out-shouting the intensifying murmurs of the peasants. "I believe in divine judgment, and in a divine trial. Let the witch face trial by ordeal."
"Excellent idea," the Witcher interrupted loudly, stepping out from the crowd. The priest glared at him. The peasants stopped muttering and stared at him with mouths agape.
"Trial by ordeal,"
Geralt repeated, to complete silence from the crowd,
"is utterly certain and utterly just. The verdicts of trial by ordeal are also accepted by secular courts and have their own principles. These rules say that in the case of a charge against a woman, child, old or otherwise enfeebled person, a defence counsel may represent them. Am I right, Elder Larbs? So, I hereby offer myself in that role. Mark off the circle. Whomsoever is certain of the girl's guilt and is not afraid of trial of ordeal should step forward and do battle with me."
"Ha!"
the priest called, still glaring at him.
"Don't be too cunning, noble stranger, throwing down the gauntlet. It's clear at once you are a swordsman and a killer. You wish to conduct a trial of ordeal with your criminal sword."
"If the sword doesn't suit you, your reverence," Zoltan Chive announced in a drawling voice, standing alongside Geralt, and if you object to this gentleman, perhaps I would be more suitable. By all means may the girl's accuser take up a battle-axe against me. Or challenge me at archery, Milver said, narrowing her eyes and also stepping forward. A single arrow each at 100 paces.
Do you see, people, how quickly defenders of the witch are springing up?
The priest screamed, and then turned away and contorted his face into a cunning smile.
Very well, you good-for-nothings. I invite all three of you to the trial by ordeal, which will soon take place. We shall establish the hag's guilt and test your virtue at one and the same time, but not using swords, battle-axes, lances, or arrows. You know, you say, the rules. I also know them. See the horseshoes in the coals, glowing white-hot? Baptism of fire. Come, O minions of witchcraft! Whomsoever removes a horseshoe from the fire, brings it to me, and betrays no marks of burning, will have proven that the witch is innocent. If, though, the trial of ordeal reveals something else, then it shall be death to all of you, and to her. I have spoken.
The hostile rumble of Elder Labs and his group was drowned out by the enthusiastic cries of most of the people gathered behind the priest. The mob had already scented excellent sport and entertainment. Milver looked at Zoltan, Zoltan at the Witcher, and the Witcher first at the sky and then at Milver. "Do you believe in the gods?" he asked in hushed tones. "Yes, I do," the archer snapped back softly, looking at the glowing coals. "But I don't think they'll want to be bothered by red-hot horseshoes." "It's no more than 3 paces from the fire to that bastard," Zoltan hissed through clenched teeth. "I'll get through it somehow. I worked in a foundry. But if you wouldn't mind praying to your gods for me—" "One moment," Emil Regis said, placing a hand on the dwarf's shoulder. "Please withhold your prayers." The barber-surgeon walked over to the fire, bowed to the priest and the audience, then stooped rapidly and put his hand into the hot coals. The crowd screamed as one. Zoltan cursed, and Milver dug her fingers into Geralt's arm. Regis straightened up, calmly looked down at the white-hot horseshoe he was holding, and walked unhurriedly over to the priest. The priest took a step back, bumping into the peasants standing behind him. "This was the idea, if I am not mistaken, your reverence," Regis said, holding up the horseshoe. "Baptism of fire? If so, I believe the divine judgment is unambiguous. The girl is innocent, her defenders are innocent, and I, just imagine, am also innocent." Show me your hand," the priest mumbled. "Is it not burnt?" The barber-surgeon smiled his usual smile with pursed lips, then moved the horseshoe to his left hand, and showed his right hand, totally unharmed, first to the priest, and then, holding it up high, to everyone else. The crowd roared. "Whose horseshoe is it?" Regis asked. "Let the owner take it back." No one came forward.
"It's a devilish trick," the priest bellowed. "You are a sorcerer yourself, or the devil incarnate."
Regis threw the horseshoe onto the ground and turned around. "Carry out an exorcism on me, then," he suggested coldly. "You are free to do so. But the trial of ordeal has taken place. I have heard, though, that to question its verdict is heresy." "Perish! Begone!" the priest shrieked, waving an amulet in front of the barber-surgeon's nose and tracing cabalistic signs with his other hand. "Begone to the abyss of hell, devil! May the earth be riven asunder beneath you! That is enough!" Zoltan shouted angrily. "Hey, people! Elder Labs! Do you intend to stand and watch this foolishness any longer? Do you intend—" The dwarf's voice was drowned out by a piercing cry. "Niflgaard! Cavalry from the west! Horsemen! Niflgaard are attacking! Every man for himself!" In one moment, the camp was transformed into total pandemonium. The peasants charged towards their wagons and shelters, knocking each other down and trampling on each other. A single, great cry rose up into the sky. "Our horses!" Milver yelled, making room around herself with punches and kicks. "Our horses, Witcher! Follow me, quickly!" "Geralt!" Dandelion shouted. "Save me!" The crowd separated them, scattered them like a great wave, and carried Milver away in the blink of an eye. Geralt, gripping Dandelion by the collar, didn't allow himself to be swept away, for just in time he caught hold of the wagon which the girl accused of witchcraft was tied to. The wagon, however, suddenly lurched and moved off,
and the Witcher and the poet fell to the ground. The girl jerked her head and began to laugh hysterically. As the wagon receded, the laughter became quieter, and was then lost among the uproar.
"They'll trample us!" Dandelion shouted from the ground. "They'll crush us! Help!"
"Now!"
Field Marshal Windbag squawked from somewhere out of sight. Geralt raised his head, spat out some sand, and saw a chaotic scene. Only 4 people did not panic, although, to tell the truth, one of them simply had no choice. That was the priest, unable to move, owing to his neck being held in the iron grip of Hector Labs. The 2 other individuals were Zoltan and Percival. The gnome lifted up the priest's robe at the back with a rapid movement, and the dwarf, armed with the pincers, seized a red-hot horseshoe from the fire and dropped it down the saintly man's long johns. Freed from Lab's grip, the priest shot straight ahead like a comet with a smoking tail, but his screams were drowned in the roar of the crowd. Geralt saw Labs, the gnome and the dwarf about to congratulate one another on a successful ordeal by fire, when another wave of panic-stricken peasants descended upon them. Everything disappeared in clouds of dust. The Witcher could no longer see anything, though neither did he have time to watch, since he was busy rescuing Dandelion, whose legs had been swept from under him again by a stampeding hog. When Geralt bent down to lift the poet up, a hayrack was thrown straight on his back from a wagon rattling past. The weight pinned him to the ground, and before he was able to throw it off, a dozen people ran across it. When he finally freed himself, another wagon overturned with a bang and a crash right alongside, and 3 sacks of wheaten flour, costing £1 a pound in the camp, fell onto him. The sacks split open, and the world vanished in a white cloud.
"Get up, Geralt!" the troubadour yelled. "Get on your blasted feet!"
"I can't," the Witcher groaned, blinded by the precious flour, seizing in both hands his knee, which had been shot through by an overwhelming pain. "Save yourself, Dandelion."
"I won't leave you."
Gruesome screams could be heard from the western edge of the camp, mixed up with the thud of iron-shod hooves and the neighing of horses. The screaming and tramping of hooves intensified suddenly, and the ringing, clanging and banging of metal striking against metal joined it.
"It's a battle!" the poet shouted. "It's war!"
"Who's fighting who?" Geralt asked, trying desperately to clean the flour and chaff from his eyes. Not far away, something was on fire, and they were engulfed by a wave of heat and a cloud of foul-smelling smoke. The hoofbeats rose in their ears, and the earth shuddered. The first thing he saw in the cloud of dust were dozens of horses' fetlocks crashing up and down, all around him. He fought off the pain. "Get under the wagon! Hide under the wagon, Dandelion, or they'll trample us!"
"Let's stay still,"
the poet whimpered, flattened against the ground.
"Let's just lie here. I've heard a horse will never tread on a person lying on the ground."
"I'm not sure," Geralt exhaled, "if every horse has heard that. Under the wagon, quickly." At that moment, one of the horses, unaware of human proverbs, kicked him in the side of the head as it thundered by. Suddenly, all the constellations of the firmament flashed red and gold in the Witcher's eyes, and a moment later, the earth and the sky were engulfed in impenetrable darkness. The rats sprang up, awoken by a long drawn-out scream that boomed with an intensifying echo around the walls of the cave. Asa and Reef seized their swords, and Iskra swore loudly as she banged her head on a rocky protrusion.
"What is it?"
Kaylee yelled.
"What's happening?"
It was dark in the cave, even though the sun was shining outside. The rats had been sleeping off a night spent in the saddle, fleeing from pursuers. Gisela shoved a brand into the glowing embers, lit it, held it up, and walked over to where Ciri and Missel were sleeping, as usual away from the rest of the gang. Ciri was sitting with her head down, and Missel had her arm around her. Gisela lifted the flaming brand higher. The others also approached. Missel covered Ciri's naked shoulders with a fur. "Listen, Missel," the leader of the rats said gravely. "I've never interfered with what you two do in a single bed. I've never said a nasty or mocking word. I always try to look the other way and not notice. It's your business and your tastes, and nobody else's, as long as you do it discreetly and quietly. But this time you went a little too far."
"Don't be stupid," Missel exploded.
"Are you trying to say that—"
"She was screaming in her sleep. It was a nightmare."
"Don't yell."
"Volker?"
Ciri nodded. "Was your dream so dreadful? What was it about?"
"Leave her in peace.
Give it a rest, Missel." "Volker?"
Someone I once knew,"
Ciri stammered.
"was being trampled by horses." The hooves. I felt them crushing me. I felt his pain in my head and knee. I can still feel it. I'm sorry I woke you up.
Don't be sorry, Gisela said, looking at Missel's stern expression. You two deserve the apology. Forgive me. And the dream. Why, anybody could have dreamed that. Anybody. Ciri closed her eyes. She wasn't certain if Gisela was right. He was awoken by a kick. He was lying with his head against a wheel of the overturned cart, with Dandelion hunched up alongside him. He had been kicked by a foot soldier in a padded jacket and a round helmet. A second stood beside him. They were both holding the reins of horses, the saddles of which were hung with crossbows and shields.
Bloody millers or what?
The other soldier shrugged. Geralt saw that Dandelion couldn't take his eyes off the shields. Geralt himself had already noticed that there were lilies on them, the emblem of the King of Temeria. Other mounted crossbowmen, who were swarming around nearby, also bore the same arms. Most of them were busy catching horses and stripping the dead. The latter mainly wore black Nilfgaardian cloaks. The camp was still a smoking ruin after the attack, but peasants who had survived and hadn't fled very far were beginning to reappear. The mounted crossbowmen with Temerian lilies were rounding them up with loud shouts. Neither Milva, Zoltan, Percival nor Regis were anywhere to be seen. The hero of the recent witchcraft trial, the black tomcat, sat alongside the cart, dispassionately looking at Geralt with his greenish golden eyes. The Witcher was a little surprised, since ordinary cats couldn't bear his presence. He had no time to reflect on this unusual phenomenon, since one of the soldiers was prodding him with a shaft of his lance.
Get up, you two.
Hey, the grey-haired one has a sword.
Drop your weapon,
the other one shouted, attracting the attention of the rest.
Drop your sword on the ground, right now, or I'll stick you with my glaive.
Geralt obeyed. His head was ringing.
Who are you?
Travellers, Dandelion said.
Sure you are, the soldier snorted. Are you travelling home, after fleeing from your standard and throwing away your uniforms? There are plenty of travellers like that in this camp who've taken fright at Niflgaard and lost the taste for army bread. Some of them are old friends of ours from our regiment.
Those travellers can expect another trip now, his companion cackled.
A short one, upwards on a rope.
We aren't deserters, the poet yelled.
We'll find out who you are when you account for yourselves to the officer.
A unit of light horse, led by several armoured cavalrymen with splendid plumes on their helmets, emerged from the ring of mounted crossbowmen. Dandelion looked closely at the knights, brushed the flour off himself, and tidied up his clothing, then spat on a hand and smoothed down his dishevelled hair.
Geralt, keep quiet, he forewarned. I'll parley with them. They're Temerian knights. They defeated the Nilfgaardians. They won't do anything to us. I know how to talk to the knighthood. You have to show them that they aren't dealing with commoners, but with equals. Dandelion, for the love of... Never fear. Everything will be fine. I have a lot of experience in talking to the knighthood and the nobility. Half of Temeria know me.
Hey! Out of our way, servants! Step aside. I wish to speak with your superiors.
The soldiers looked on hesitantly, and then raised their couched lances and made room. Dandelion and Geralt moved towards the knights. The poet strode proudly, bearing a lordly expression which was somewhat out of place considering his frayed and flour-soiled tunic.
Stop!
One of the armoured men yelled at him.
Not another step! Who are you?
Who should I tell?
Dandelion said, putting his hands on his hips.
And why? Who are these well-born lords that they oppress innocent travellers?
You don't ask the questions, riffraff, you answer them.
The troubadour inclined his head and looked at the coats of arms on the knights' shields and tabards.
3 red hearts on a golden field, he observed. That means you are an Aubrey. There's a 3-pointed label on the shield's chief, so you must be the eldest son of Anselm Aubrey. I know your pater well, good Sir Knight. And you, strident Sir Knight, what do you have in your silver shield? A black stripe between 2 griffins' heads? The Papebrock family's coat of arms, if I'm not mistaken, and I am rarely mistaken in matters of this kind. The stripe, they say, illustrates the acuity possessed by that family's members.
Will you bloody stop? Geralt groaned.
I'm the celebrated poet Dandelion,
the bard said, puffing himself up and paying no attention to the Witcher.
No doubt you've heard of me. Lead me then to your commander, to the seigneur, for I'm accustomed to speaking with equals.
The knights did not react, but their facial expressions became more and more uncongenial,
and their iron gloves gripped their decorated bridles more and more tightly. Dandelion clearly hadn't noticed. "Well, what's the matter with you?" he asked haughtily. "What are you staring at? Yes, I'm talking to you, Sir Blackstripe. Why are you making faces? Did someone tell you that if you narrow your eyes and stick your lower jaw out, you look manly, doughty, dignified and menacing? Well, they deceived you. You look like someone who hasn't had a decent shit for a week." "Seize them!" yelled the eldest son of Andrzej Aubrey, the bearer of the shield with 3 hearts, to the foot soldiers. The Blackstripe from the Paperbrock family spurred his steed. "Seize them! Bind the blackguards!" They walked behind the horses, pulled by ropes attaching their wrists to the pommels. They walked, and occasionally ran, because the horsemen spared neither their mounts nor their captives. Dandelion fell over twice, and was dragged along on his belly, yelling pathetically. He was stood up again, and urged on roughly with the lance shaft, and then driven on once more. The dust choked and blinded them, making their eyes water and their noses tingle. Thirst parched their throats. Only one thing was encouraging. The road they were being driven along was heading south. Geralt was thus journeying in the right direction at last, and pretty quickly at that. He wasn't happy, though, because he had imagined the journey would be altogether different. They arrived at their destination just as Dandelion had made himself hoarse from curses peppered with cries for mercy, while the pain in Geralt's elbow and knee had become sheer torment, so severe that the Witcher had begun to consider taking radical or even desperate measures. They reached a military camp organized around a ruined, half-burnt stronghold. Beyond the ring of guards, hitching bars, and smoking campfires, they saw knights' tents adorned with pennants, surrounding a large and bustling field, beyond a ruined and charred stockade. The field marked the end of their forced trek. Seeing a horse trough, Geralt and Dandelion strained against their bonds. The horsemen were initially disinclined to let them go anywhere near the water, but Anselm Aubrey's son evidently recalled the supposed acquaintance of Dandelion and his father, and deigned to be kind. They forced their way between the horses, and drank and washed their faces using their bound hands. A tug of the ropes soon brought them back to reality. "Who have you brought me this time?" said a tall, slim knight in enamelled, richly gilded armour, rhythmically striking a mace against an ornamented tasset. "Don't tell me it's more spies." "Spies or deserters," Anselm Aubrey's son stated. "We captured them in the camp by the Chotler, when we wiped out the Nilfgaardian foray. Clearly a suspicious element." The knight in the gilded armour snorted, looked intently at Dandelion, and then his young but austere face suddenly lit up. "Nonsense! Untie them!" "They're Nilfgaardian spies," Blackstripe of the Paperbrock said indignantly. "Particularly this one here, as insolent as a country cur, says he's a poet, the rogue, and he speaks the truth." The knight in the gilded armour smiled. "It's the bard Dandelion, I know him. Remove his bonds, and free the other one, too." "Are you sure, my lord?" "That was an order, Knight Paperbrock." "Didn't realize I could come in useful, did you?" said Dandelion to Geralt, while he rubbed his wrists, which were numb from the bonds. "So now you do. My fame goes before me. I'm known and esteemed everywhere." Geralt didn't comment, being busy massaging his own wrists, his sore elbow and knee. "Please forgive the overzealousness of these youngsters," said the knight, who had been addressed as a member of the nobility. "They see Nilfgaardian spies everywhere. Bring back a few suspicious-looking types every time they're sent out. I mean, anybody who in any way stands out from the fleeing rabble. And you, Master Dandelion, stand out after all. How did you end up by the Chotler among those fugitives?" "I was travelling from Dillingen to Maribor," the poet lied with ease, "when we were caught up in this hell, me and my confrere. You're sure to know him. His name is Giraldus." "But of course I do. I've read him," the knight bragged. "It's an honour for me, Master Giraldus. I am Daniel Etchevery, Count of Garamone. Upon my word, Master Dandelion, much has changed since the times you sang at King Foltest's court." "Much indeed." "Who would have thought," the Count said, his face darkening, "that it would come to this? Verden subjugated to Emir, Brugge practically defeated, Sodden in flames, and we're in retreat, constant retreat. My apologies. I meant to say we are executing tactical withdrawals. Nilfgaard are burning and pillaging everywhere. They have almost reached the banks of the Aina, have almost completed the sieges of the fortresses of Maena and Razwan, and the Temerian army continues its tactical withdrawals. When I saw the lilies on your shields by the chotler, Dandelion said, I thought the offensive was here. A counter-attack, Daniel Echeverry corrected him, and reconnaissance in force. We crossed the Aina, put to the sword a few Nilfgaardian forays and Scoia'tael commandos who were lighting fires. You can see what remains of the garrison in Armeria, who we managed to free. But the forts in Carcano and Vidort were burnt to the ground. The entire south is soaked in blood, afire and dense with smoke. But I'm boring you. You know only too well what's happening in Burger and Sodden. After all, you ended up wandering with fugitives from there, and my brave boys took you for spies. Please, accept my apologies one more time, and my invitation to dinner. Some of the noblemen and officers will be delighted to meet you, Master Poets. It is a genuine honour, my lord, said Geralt, bowing stiffly. But time is short. We must be away. Oh, please, don't be shy, Daniel Echeverry said, smiling. A standard, modest soldier's repast. Venison, grouse, sterlet, truffles. To decline, Dandelion said, swallowing and giving the Witcher a telling glance, would be a serious affront. Let us go without delay. My lord, is that your tent, the sumptuous one in blue and gold? No, that is the Commander-in-Chief's. Azure and gold are the colours of his fatherland. Really? Dandelion said in astonishment. I thought this was the Temerian army, and that you were in command. This is a regiment assigned to the Temerian army. I am King Foltest's liaison officer, and a goodly number of the Temerian nobility are serving here with detachments, which bear lilies on their shields as a formality. But the main part of this corps consists of the subjects of another kingdom. Do you see the standard in front of the tent? Lions, Geralt said, stopping. Golden lions on a blue field. That's the emblem of Cintra, the Count averred. They are emigrants from the kingdom of Cintra, at present occupied by Niflgaard, under the command of Marshal Visegerd. Geralt turned back, intending to announce to the Count that urgent matters were none the less compelling him to decline the venison, sterlet, and truffles. He wasn't quick enough. He saw some men approaching, led by a well-built, big-bellied, grey-haired knight in a blue cloak with a gold chain over his armour. Here, Master Poets, is Marshal Visegerd in person, Daniel Echeverry said. Allow me, your lordship, to introduce you to— That would be necessary, Marshal Visegerd interrupted hoarsely, looking piercingly at Geralt. We have already been introduced, in Cintra, at the court of Queen Calanthe, on the day of Princess Pavetta's betrothal. It was 15 years ago, but I have a good memory. And you rogue of a witcher, do you remember me? Indeed I do, Geralt said, nodding, obediently holding out his hands for the soldiers to bind. Daniel Echeverry, Count of Garamone, had tried to vouch for them when the infantrymen were sitting the trussed-up Geralt and Dandelion down on stools in the tent, and now, after the soldiers had left on the orders of Marshal Visegerd, the Count renewed his efforts. That is the poet and troubadour Dandelion, Marshal, he repeated. I know him. The whole world knows him. I consider it unfitting to treat him thus. I pledge my knightly word he is not a Nilfgaardian spy. Don't make such rash pledges, Visegerd snarled, without taking his eyes off the captives. Perhaps he is a poet, but if he was captured in the company of that blackguard, the Witcher, I wouldn't vouch for him. It seems to me you still have no idea what kind of bird we've ensnared. The Witcher? Indeed. Geralt, also known as the Wolf. The very same good-for-nothing who claimed the right to Cirilla, the daughter of Pavetta and the granddaughter of Calanthe. The very same Ciri about whom everyone is talking at present. You are too young, my lord, to remember the time when that scandal was being widely discussed in many courts, but I, as it happens, was an eyewitness. But what could link him to Princess Cirilla? That scoundrel there, Visegerd said, pointing at Geralt, played his part in giving Pavetta, the daughter of Queen Calanthe, in marriage to Duny, a totally unknown stranger from the south. From that mongrel union was subsequently born Cirilla, the subject of their reprehensible conspiracy. For you ought to know that Duny, the bastard, had promised the girl to the Witcher in advance as payment for facilitating his marriage. The law of surprise, do you see? Not entirely, but speak on, my Lord Marshal. The Witcher,
Visigurd said, pointing a finger at Geralt once again. "Wanted to take the girl away after Pavetta's death, but Calanthe did not permit him and drove him away. But he waited for a timely moment. When the war with Niflgaard broke out and Cintra fell, he kidnapped Ciri, exploiting the confusion. He kept the girl hidden, although he knew we were searching for her, and finally he grew tired of her and sold her to Emir." "Those are lies and calumny," Dandelion yelled. "There is not a word of truth in it." "Quiet, fiddler, or I'll have you gagged." "Put two and two together, my lord. The Witcher had Cirilla, and now Emir var Emrys has her, and the Witcher gets captured in the vanguard of a Nilfgaardian raid. What does that signify?" Daniel Echeverry shrugged his shoulders. "What does it signify?" Visigurd repeated, bending over Geralt. "Well, you rascal, speak. How long have you been spying for Nilfgaard, cur?" "I do not spy for anybody. I'll have your hide tanned. Go ahead." "Master Dandelion," the Count of Garamond suddenly interjected, "it would probably be better if you set about explaining. The sooner the better." "I would have done so before," the poet exploded, "but my Lord Marshal here threatened to gag me. We are innocent. Those are all outright fabrications and vile slanders. Cirilla was kidnapped from the Isle of Thaneth, and Geralt was seriously wounded defending her. Anybody can confirm that. Every sorcerer who was on Thaneth, and Redania Secretary of State, Sigismund Dijkstra." Dandelion suddenly fell silent, recalling that Dijkstra was in no way suitable as a defence witness in the case, and neither were references to the mages of Thaneth likely to improve the situation to any great degree. "What utter nonsense it is," he continued loudly and quickly, "to accuse Geralt of kidnapping Ciri and Cintra. Geralt found the girl when she was wandering around in Riverdale after the city had been sacked, and hid her, not from you, but from the Nilfgaardian agents who were pursuing her. I myself was captured by those agents, and submitted to torture, so that I would betray where Ciri was concealed. But I didn't breathe a word, and those agents are now 6 feet under. They didn't know who they were up against." "Your valour," the Count interrupted, "was in vain, however. Emir finally has Cirilla. As we are all aware, he means to marry her and make her Imperatrice of Nilfgaard. For the moment he has proclaimed her Queen of Cintra and the surrounding lands, causing us some problems by so doing." "Emir," the poet declared, "could place whoever he wanted on the Cintran throne. Ciri, whichever way you look at it, has a right to the throne." "A right?" Visigurd bellowed, spraying Geralt with spittle. "What fucking right? Emir may marry her. That is his choice. He may give her and the children he desires with her endowments and titles according to his whims and fancies. Queen of Cintra and the Skellige Islands, Duchess of Brugge, Countess Palatine of Sorden. By all means, let us all bow down. And why not, I humbly ask, why not the Queen of the Sun and the Suzerain of the Moon? That accursed, tainted blood has no right to the throne. The entire female line of that family is accursed. All rotten vipers, beginning with Rhiannon. Like Cirilla's great-grandmother, Adelia, who lay with her own cousin. Like her great-great-grandmother Muriel the Impure, who debased herself with everyone. Incestuous bastards and mongrels emerged from that family on the distaff side, one after the other." "Speak more softly, my Lord Marshal," Dandelion advised haughtily. "The standard with the golden lions flutters before your tent, and you are prepared at any moment to proclaim Ciri's grandmother, Calanthe, the lioness of Cintra, in whose name the majority of your soldiers shed blood at the battles of Marnadal and Sodden, a bastard. I would not be sure of the loyalty of your army were you to do so." Visigurd covered the distance separating him from Dandelion in 2 paces, seized the poet by the ruff, and lifted him up from his chair. The Marshal's face, which a moment before had only been flecked with red spots, now assumed the colour of deep heraldic red. Geralt was just beginning to seriously worry about his friend, when luckily an aide-de-camp burst into the tent, informing the Marshal in an excited voice about urgent and important news brought by the scouts. Visigurd shoved Dandelion back down onto the stool and exited. "Phew," the poet snuffled, twisting his head and neck around. "Much more of that, and he'd have throttled me. Could you loosen my bonds somewhat, my lord?" "No, Master Dandelion, I cannot." "Do you give credence to this balderdash, that we are spies?" "My credence is neither here nor there. You will remain bound." "Very well," Dandelion said, clearing his throat. "What's got into your Marshal?"
Why did he suddenly assault me like a falcon swooping on a woodcock?
Daniel Echeverry smiled wryly. When you alluded to the soldier's loyalty, you unwittingly rubbed salt in the wound, Master Poet.
What do you mean? What wound?
These soldiers sincerely lamented Cirilla's passing when news of her death reached them, and then new information got out. It turned out that Calanthe's granddaughter was alive, that she was in Niflgaard, in the good graces of Imperator Emir, which led to mass desertion. Bear in mind that these men left their homes and families and fled to Sodden and Brugge and to Temeria because they wanted to fight for Cintra, for Calanthe's blood. They wanted to liberate their country, to drive the invader from Cintra, so that Calanthe's descendant would regain the throne. And what has happened? Calanthe's blood is returning to the Cintran throne in triumph and glory, as a puppet in the hands of Emir, who kidnapped her. Emir will marry her. He wants to place her beside him on the imperial throne and validate her titles and fiefs. Is that how puppets are treated? Cirilla was seen at the imperial court by envoys from Kovir. They maintain that she did not give the impression of someone who had been kidnapped. Cirilla, the only heiress to Cintra's throne, is returning to that throne as an ally of Niflgaard. That is the news that has spread among the soldiery.
Circulated by Nilfgaardian agents?
I'm aware of that, the Count nodded, but the soldiers aren't. When we catch deserters, we stretch their necks, but I understand them a little. They're Cintrans. They want to fight for their own, not Temerian homes. Under their own banner, under their own command, not the command of Temeria. They see that here, in this army, their golden lions have to bow the knee before the Temerian lilies. Visigerd had 8,000 men, of which 5,000 were native Cintrans. The rest consisted of Temerian reserve units and volunteer chivalry from Brugge and Sodden. At this moment, the corps numbers 6,000, and all the deserters have been from Cintra. Visigerd's army has been decimated even before the battle has begun. Do you understand what that means for him?
A serious loss of face, and maybe position.
Precisely. Should another few hundred desert, King Foltest will deprive him of his baton. Right now it's hard to call this corps Cintran. Visigerd is vacillating, wanting to put an end to the defection, which is why he's spreading rumours about the doubtful, but almost certainly unlawful, descent of Cirilla and her ancestors. Which you, Geralt said, unable to stop himself, listened to with evident distaste, my lord. Have you noticed? Daniel Echeverry said, smiling faintly. Why? Visigerd doesn't know my lineage. In short, I'm related to this Cirilla. Muriel, Countess of Garamone, known as the Beautiful Impure, Cirilla's great-great-grandmother, was also my great-great-grandmother. Legends about her love affairs circulate in the family to this day. However, I listen with distaste as Visigerd imputes incestuous tendencies and promiscuity to my ancestor. But I do not react, because I'm a soldier. Do you understand me sufficiently, gentlemen? Yes, Geralt said.
No, Dandelion said.
Visigerd is the commander of this corps, which forms part of the Temerian army, and Cirilla, in Emir's hands, is a threat to the corps, and thus to the army, not to mention my king and my country. I have no intention of refuting the rumours being circulated about Cirilla by Visigerd, nor of challenging my commanding officer's authority. I even intend to support him in proving that Cirilla is a bastard with no rights to the throne. Not only will I not challenge the Marshal, not only will I not question his decisions or orders, I shall actually support them, and execute them when necessary. The witch's mouth contorted into a smile. I think you understand now, don't you, Dandelion? Not for a moment did the Count consider us spies, or he would not have given us such a thorough explanation. The Count knows we're innocent, but he will not lift a finger when Visigerd sentences us.
You mean where?
The Count looked away. Visigerd, he said softly, is furious. You were unlucky to fall into his hands, particularly you, Master Witcher. As for Master Dandelion, I shall try to— He was interrupted by the return of Visigerd, still red-faced and panting like a bull. The Marshal walked over to the table, slammed his mace onto the maps spread over it, then turned towards Geralt and bored his eyes into him. The Witcher did not avert his gaze.
"The wounded Nilfgaardian the scouts captured," Visigurd drawled, "managed to tear his dressing off and bled to death on the way. He preferred to die rather than contribute to the defeat and death of his countrymen. We wanted to use him, but he escaped, slipped through our fingers, leaving nothing on them but blood. He'd been well schooled. It's a pity that witchers don't instill such customs in royal children when they take them to be raised."
Geralt remained silent, but still did not lower his eyes.
"Well, you monster, you freak of nature, you hell-spawn. What did you teach Cirilla after kidnapping her? How did you bring her up? Everyone can see how. That snake in the grass is alive and is lounging on the Nilfgaardian throne as if it were nothing. And when Emir takes her to his bed, she's sure to spread her legs willingly, as if it were nothing to the slut."
"Your anger is getting the better of you," Dandelion mumbled. "Is it chivalrous, Marshal, to blame a child for everything? A child that Emir took by force?"
"There are also ways against force. Chivalrous ones, noble ones. Were she really of royal blood, she would have found a way. She would have found a knife, a pair of scissors, a piece of broken glass, why, even a bodkin. That bitch could have torn open the veins in her wrists with her own teeth, or hanged herself with her own stockings."
"I don't want to listen to you any longer, Marshal," Geralt said softly. "I don't want to listen to you any longer." Visigurd ground his teeth audibly and leant over.
"You don't want to,"
he said, in a voice trembling with fury.
"That is fortunate, because I don't have anything more to say to you, apart from one thing. Back then, in Cintra, 15 years ago, a great deal was said about destiny. At the time, I thought it was nonsense, but it turned out to be your destiny, Witcher. Ever since that night, your fate has been sealed, written in black runes among the stars. Ciri, daughter of Pavetta, is your destiny, and your death. Because of Ciri, daughter of Pavetta, you shall hang."
The brigade joined Operation Centaur as a unit assigned to the 4th Horse Cavalry. We received reinforcements in the form of 3 squads of Verdanian light horse, which I assigned to the Vreemde battle group. Following the example of the campaign in Aedion, I created 2 more battle groups from the rest of the brigade, naming them Sievers and Mortisen, each comprising 4 squadrons. We set out from the concentration area near Drishot on the night of the 4th of August. The group's orders ran: capture the Vidot Carcano Ameria territory, seize the crossing of the Aina, destroy any hostile troops encountered, but avoid significant points of resistance, start fires, particularly at night, to light the way for the 4th Horse Cavalry, induce panic among civilians, and use their flight to block all of the arterial routes to the enemy's rear, feign encirclement to drive the retreating enemy forces towards the actual encirclements, carry out the elimination of selected groups of the civilian population and prisoners of war to cause terror, intensify panic, and undermine the enemy's morale. The brigade carried out the above mission with great soldierly devotion. Ilan Trahe, for Imperator and Fatherland, the glorious trail of fire of the 7th Dalanian Cavalry Brigade.